everyone, and welcome to today's panel. Thanks for joining us. Today we're looking at one of the fastest moving areas in digital infrastructure: AI factories, neoclouds, sovereign AI, and what the next generation of infrastructure in Europe could look like. We've got a great panel, bringing some perspectives from design, deployment, operations, strategy. So we'll start with some quick introductions, and then we'll jump straight into the discussion. Lewis, would you like to start off for me? Just a bit about yourself and your company, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Lewis Cobb. I'm the Global Director for Modular AI Factories and Data Centres at Durata. We're a business who has focused on engineering skill sets and integration, but we've moved into the modular space with our fabrication department. And we're trying to build confidence and lead a bit of a charge on how modular can adapt the deployment landscape for data centers, but in particular, how AI can fit into that space for speed to market.
Great. Christian?
Thank you. Christian Goldsmith. I'm from Arcadis. I'm the Global Data Center Solution Lead. Arcadis, we're a global design, engineering and consultancy business. And within the data center space, we operate right across the whole asset life cycle from the investment and advisory upfront through permitting, architecture design, and then project and cost management of the delivery on site. Currently, we're operating around, working on about 300 different data center projects. I got the numbers in the other day, it blew my mind. Represents about 19 gig of compute. So we've got quite a reach mostly across Europe and North America.
Great, thank you. Andrew, would you like to?
Hi, Madeline. I'm Andrew Harrison. I'm Director of Master Planning at nLighten, which is the European Distributed Infrastructure Platform. We're an edge colocation provider, so we focus particularly on the neo-cloud section of the market. We believe in local footprint that's connected, that scales to the size of our communities, and that's who we are.
Great. Blaine?
Yeah, Blaine Dawes, Solutions Director at WNTD. WNTD are a niche AI infrastructure consultancy, specialising on all of the NVIDIA GPU deployments across Europe. And we also have an RPO arm as well, where we're sitting on site building all the teams and people behind the ecosystem that's very much needed at the moment.
And Falk, let's finish with you.
Yeah, my name is Falk Weinreich. I'm CEO of Portus Data Centres. It's a data center company, colo company, multi-tenant in the 2 to 10, 15 megawatt range in the tier 2 market, so Hamburg, Luxembourg, Munich. That's our focus.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. So let's jump straight in. So to set the scene, let's get everyone sort of thinking about the same language, and let's get some explanations. So, Lewis, I'll start with you. What's the difference between an AI factory, a hyperscale AI campus, and a traditional data center? And where does neocloud fit into that picture?
Okay, so AI factory as a term really kind of got driven by NVIDIA. If you look back to GTC 2025, when they really pushed the Blackwell product, that term started to become far more commonly used. As Jensen from NVIDIA talks about, it's an environment that is manufacturing data. It's creating its own source in part of the modeling and the training systems. Where that sits separate to a data center, as I'm sure we all know, is data centers, if they're colo, have become a source of predominantly storage and processing and sending and receiving. So it has a different mentality in how it's treating data. In terms of the hyperscaler piece, that's where, again, the evolution of neoclouds in the last 2 years. And neoclouds themselves are an interesting animal, because they're predominantly companies that come from an energy background. Look at the likes of Crusoe, CoreWeave, even Nscale. They've really focused on energy at their core, and even some of them have developed out of Bitcoin mining, and so they have a tendency to be working with GPUs in some sort of fashion anyway. But what you've seen is that that ecosystem of NVIDIA supporting that network in order to support their GPUs further down the line. So they have created a cluster which almost sits outside of the data center industry, but it looks and smells and sounds like a data center, but it is its own entity.
And it's a lot bigger, typically.
Well, that's the thing, is they've kind of, all the great numbers we talk about, they've been exploded by this market, and I think we have to be clear in the sense of, certainly in the US, those numbers are starting to materialize. You look at what Crusoe have been doing in Abilene, and then more and more of these sites popping up. You've then seen the hyperscalers getting involved in this market. AWS or even Google with their own TPU, a slightly different type of processing unit, but still working at high densities. It's a market which we have to not get caught up too much in the numbers because they are over a period of time. But it's the exciting aspect of what we see in this market. I think it's an interesting beast to work alongside the colo and the traditional hyperscaler.
Absolutely, and I think the term braggawatts is something I heard a few months ago.
Yeah.
It's quite appropriate in this sort of panel we're talking about today. Okay, so let's move on. So Falk, I'd like to talk to you, actually. So AI sovereignty has become one of the biggest themes in Europe at the moment. Falk, I'd like to ask you, how important is digital sovereignty today? And what does it actually mean in practical infrastructure terms? I know we covered on NPM Portus's expansion at the Hamburg and Munich sites, so maybe you could give us some insight in relation to those.
No, thank you for the question. Indeed, sovereignty is a big topic. It is for AI, but also for traditional use cases in the cloud. That's actually one of the reasons why we chosen to go in tier 2 markets, because we believe that there's a bit of underserved markets today. One area, just traditional clouds, people get a bit afraid, Patriot Act, Cloud Act, so they want to get less dependent, more sovereign. You see more private clouds coming up, so more virtualization on-site or on-prem or in the data center of customer's choice, moving closer to the workloads of the IT departments in the enterprise market. And you see also the hyperscalers changing some of their offerings and getting more decentralized, like the AWS Outpost product or OPCP from OVH Cloud. So they have on-prem cloud flavors, if you like, air-gapped solutions. So that's one trend. Mm-hmm. The second one is in the AI infrastructure as well. Training is one thing, obviously, and these are not really touching my market, German-speaking or Central European market, because of the energy cost, will be up north. Iceland, Norway, Finland, or in the US. But in the interference, you have people want to be much closer for latency reason as well to their workload. So that's another trend that AI, they want to be sovereign. They don't necessarily want to be dependent on other geographies or other governments under foreign control. So that's a reason. Plus, they want low latency as well. So it's a trend that AI is moving also from not just the big modeling, also to the smaller markets closer to where the customer needs.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Christian, I might just jump to you off the back of that. Does sovereignty increasingly affect site selection and infrastructure planning, would you say?
Yes, basically.
Okay.
Sovereignty is it's a complete architecture. So you want to control you want to know what the data is, you want to know where the data is, and then you want to be able to secure that data both physically and cyber. And that comes down to actually having those data centers in geographical locations within that host country. The pressures on site selection, though, still remain focused around power, really. Power, then permitting. These sovereign AI opportunities need to go to where the power is. So you're going to see more of those secondary markets really starting to pick up. But we're not talking about AI of the scale of the hyperscalers and so on. Europe's not going to compete in that sovereign AI space with scale in the same way as it has in America or the American tech firms that are in the Nordics and so on. It's going to be much more about being certain on what data is important to that country or that business, that enterprise, and then ensuring the right governance and access is put in place around that data. So it's not an arms race in the sense of they want to build AI factories, but we will see more hybrid data centers, more GPU mixed with storage and so on in these sovereign locations.
Okay, great. That actually lends quite nicely into my next question. Andrew, I'll come to you for this. So we're obviously starting to see a genuine sort of European alternative to the US hyperscale market. I think we're having to think differently. Could you talk a bit maybe about nLighten's expansion across Europe? So I know that you guys cover the UK, France, Spain, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Belgium. How would you say the model is potentially different to what we're seeing in North America?
I think, to Christian's point, you have enterprises, but also particularly enterprises that serve government and customers, looking more and more at where they're hosting their data, which services they're putting into the cloud, what implications that has for them about control of their data and potential political influence on the use of their data, access to their data, and thinking much more carefully about the design of their business systems. Also thinking about where those business systems are. You know, there isn't the same drive to just stick everything in the cloud and have it out of sight and out of mind that maybe there was, even until a couple of years ago. And for us, that means that serving the market effectively not just requires you to be where your customer is, but it also requires you to make use of what Europe has to offer. So, you know, to the points I think Falk's made, for example, about cost of power, advantages of different locations, availability of space, time to market. These are things that push you to, in some cases, also to look to other areas like the Nordics, areas like France.
Outside of flat D, for example.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and we're proud to be able to offer that. You know, our platform spans 36 locations. They're unique. And it means we can we can bring an offering to market that is can be really tailored to what our customers need.
Great, thank you. So Christian, you touched on power. I think that's something we really need to think about, because often we're seeing, data centers will crop up on the grid in applications, but they'll usually be near a solar park, or they'll be near a BESS facility, or there's usually a tie that we're seeing across Europe. So I guess it's becoming kind of central to every AI discussion that we're having. Do we think, and I hate to go on, we all talk about the grid, but do we think Europe's grid can realistically support these next generation AI workloads? And which markets currently look the strongest?
In short, no.
Okay.
In the next 5 to 10 years, that grid connectivity is going to be the biggest constraint. It will catch up, but it's not going to catch up in time for what we want to build the AI engine of Europe for the future. So the whole power regulation piece about how projects are selected, about the transmission decisions on which project's going to move forward, that's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So people that are operating platforms across multiple countries in Europe are thinking, well, why is that taking me 10 years to get the power here, and it's going to be 5 years here? So it's a really complex picture of the different grids around the world. And we've seen some big outages with grids. Obviously, we saw what happened in Spain and Portugal last year. Yep. Even local connection issues with the big fire at Heathrow a couple of years ago. The grid operators are used to steady, stable loads.
Absolutely.
They understand what power they need to produce, and they want the deal to say, right, we're going to give you that much power, and that's it. We're moving to a space now with the increase of neo cloud and GPUs and inference and so on, where the loads that these data centers require are going to be spiking all over the place when you're in training modes, or when different types of inference are going to be used, and the grid doesn't like that. They're not set up for that flexibility yet. So we're having to think about more innovative solutions, power solutions. We're involved with all sorts of private wire behind the meter solutions. We're seeing gas turbines in Ireland. We're seeing a lot of BESS systems and so on in Germany and places like that at the moment, connected the solar parks and the wind around Spain and Portugal. And in the UK with the AI growth zones, a lot of those are ideally located to benefit from the restricted power that's coming in from Scotland and the north of England, where we just can't get that wind power deployed into the grid. So these alternative technologies are going to be driving us for the next 5 to 10 years, I think. And there's no one silver bullet.
Right.
That's the issue, but increasingly going to where the power is going to be what we're going to see.
Just to interject, sorry, on that point, we've sort of spoken about different metropolises struggling under power constraints. We've seen outages, like you say. It would be interesting to hear how Arcadis basically supported the digital realty expansion in Paris, the digital park that's been rapidly growing. Could you add any sort of insight there at all?
Well, I mean, France, I think we're going to see France really come on in the next couple of years as a real power in Europe, because they have a very strong grid, and they have an excess of nuclear energy. So the French market is one of those kind of anomalies, really, in Europe, in my mind, in that they're best place for that. But then there are a lot of secondary markets as well, where there's a lot of power, and again, we have enough power, it's the transmission.
Yes.
So if you can get the land close to it, where you don't then have to have a 10-year delay for your transmission, for the grid upgrade or reinforcement, then you've got opportunities. So right across places like Belgium, that sits perfectly right in the middle of the flat D areas, it's interconnected, that's ideal for inference and edge and so on, because they've got pockets of power, that are ideal for the 2 to 5 to 10 megawatt kind of data centers. So we're going to have to start to think a bit more flexibly about how we use the power and what we do with that. And I think if the grid operators could work with the data center operators to agree on more flexibility on the loading, and when they're going to be pulling their power and when they're not, then I think we can ease some of that congestion as well.
Great. That's super interesting, thank you. Falk, I'll come back to you now, actually. So beyond GPUs and power availability, as we've discussed, what's the biggest challenge, would you say, facing developers right now? It could be cooling, fiber, permitting, talent, supply chain.
It's all of it.
I gather that.
It's all of it. Yeah, it depends a little bit on the markets as well. Most of our assets are in Germany. And yes, Germany is complicated to get permits. Even the power needs to be, you need to apply for it, and the local grids are a struggle. So actually in the range of the 1, 2, 3, 5 megawatts, it is still available. But you need to queue, you need to have lots of discussion with the local grid providers, then building permits, it takes time in Germany. So those projects are just not ideal for a fast-moving market. So it's a little bit the constraint is the bureaucracy we're seeing in probably not just Germany, other European countries struggle with that as well. But bureaucracy is a big problem. Talents as well. It's getting a little bit better.
Okay.
I think in some of the universities, people wake up and say, this is actually interesting to go for go in the universities for more mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. It's getting a little bit better, but bureaucracy and the power is the biggest constraint right now, indeed.
Interesting, thank you. Blaine, I'm just going to pivot to you now, if that's okay. So you're closer to the delivery side of the market.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what are you noticing around workforce availability and supply chains, specifically in the AI and neo-cloud sectors?
Yeah, good question. I think the number one thing that keeps most founders up at night across the neo-clouds that I hear at the moment, one is power, and the second is talent. From a talent point of view, as Jensen said at GTC a little while ago, there's tens of thousands of people needed just on the electrical side just to get this AI factory built in the first place. And, where are you going to find these people? Because it was hard to find these people 3 years ago, let alone now what the demand is now. And they're not just growing on trees, these people. So, you've really got to find the right people. And as Falk said, a lot of people coming into the industry, especially the data center industry, it wasn't one that people picked, and there wasn't probably too much to get people into it. You kind of just found your way through. So yeah, it's very challenging to keep up with the demand. That said, it's getting far better now because of neo clouds have been created. These are the cool, exciting things, and 95% of my time is spent with all of the neo clouds, building out the infrastructure behind it with the people inside it. But it's not going to go away overnight. It just got to keep getting people.
Yeah, and I mean, we sort of spoke before about what companies you're kind of working with. It would be great to sort of share with the audience the kind of expectations of your NVIDIA and people like Mistral AI and people like that.
Yeah. So me personally, I've worked with NVIDIA since 2016. I was their first partner to actually build out EMIR for them. They had about 5 people when I first started working with them, and no one really knew of them. They were just a gaming company, and then they started to deploy DGXs and we were helping them find the people across Europe, and now look at where NVIDIA are today. It's crazy the amount of people we put in back in 2016 that are still there now. But it's it's a fast-moving industry, and then I've helped, probably one of the best neo clouds, CoreWeave, across Europe, build out their function as well. They move super fast, and they're an amazing company. And yeah, we're working with hyperscalers, and some I can't mention because we're in stealth at the moment with a lot of them. But yeah, I mean, the space is just crazy. 7 days a week work all the time. for me.
Absolutely. I think my only concern with, you say there's demand for electrical engineers is people cutting corners. When you need to do a fast build and the tenants are saying we want 3 to 6 months speed to market, how can you ensure that the people you're getting in are actually, all qualified to deal with this new technology that none of us are really familiar in? I don't know if anyone wanted to jump in on that.
Well, I mean, I see that as a real concern, and from the commissioning side of things, and then when we hand things over now, we're delivering we're at risk of delivering so quickly that operational readiness is not in place. So you've done everything to get these chips in and deployed, but you're not operationally ready, and you've got that asset just sat there stranded because we're actually starting to move too quickly. And again, it's because of a shortage of talent. There's a shortage of people to help close out the commissioning, to help to actually be involved early enough to understand how they're going to operate that facility as it goes. And a lot of the stuff, and Blaine will talk about this, it's emergent. They don't really even know how this stuff's actually going to work in reality. It's some of it's theoretical architecture, and then they deploy it, and they're expected to be hitting this return. There's big money coming in from this private equity firm, big money, billions.
Huge.
And they want their return in almost in months now, rather than in terms of years. So yeah, it is a risk. It's a risk around forcing operational readiness, but then from the construction side of things, it's a risk on quality as well, because we're driving really hard in the manufacturing and so on. We've had notable issues in different products and so on, and I won't name any names, over the last year or so, where it's just their supply chain is being pushed so hard that the quality of what's being delivered just isn't up to scratch.
Yeah, I think that's a good concern. Lewis, did you have something to say? Sorry.
I think you have to make a clear line between M&E and IT. It's not all one thing, and IT is his problem, and he can have that part. But when it comes to M&E, this has been a conversation for a number of years, is talent. But we've also treated data centres as if they're their own special, unique gem. The reality is there's transferable skill sets from oil and gas, food and bev, people who have worked in mission-critical environments, and they see their skill sets as transferable, similar with even commissioning. So it's about having a more flexible understanding of where you can go to get talent, rather than just saying, it's like any cliche, have you got 10 years experience in data centres? Most people haven't. They've been developing it over the years. So the flexibility has to come in.
Interesting, great. So Lewis, sorry to jump on you again, you're right, just realised you've just spoken to me there. But I wanted to ask you about cooling. It comes up a lot as a topic, but I think, are we sort of reaching a point where liquid cooling becomes the standard for AI facilities? Or is there still room for advanced air cooling and things like that?
I think on the conversation of liquid's gone over the last year. There's been more of a defined path in terms of liquid to liquid being direct to chip and cold plate technology. But again, you go back to GTC last year and the announcement of Blackwell. That announcement in terms of the vertical architecture, it almost, dare I say, I'm not going to say it's too much, but the immersion market, immersion tanks, that dipped off. And for a number of years, there was always a competing market of who's going to be the leader in HPC between immersion tanks and direct-to-chip. That's not to say immersion doesn't have a future. I'm not here to say that, but there was clearly a defined path with Blackwell and then Rubin in terms of it being vertical architecture, and it's going to be cold plate technology. I'm still fascinated in trying to find out how well cold plate technology is working, but you've seen, again, an expansion in that space of products of suppliers and variants there. And again, you look at what's happening with the Rubin and the conversations around it being 45-degree running temperatures. What does that do for chiller selection in different ambience and its overall design? From what we're looking at, even in a modular perspective, if you have a rack and you're doing your cold plate technology, that's circa 80% of your overall heat gains. There's still auxiliary heat in and around that rack. So we have a principle of marrying the likes of a rear door heat exchanger, which even those have their misnomers of whether people like them or not, fan wall technology to cover that other 20%. So then you have liquid to liquid, liquid to air,
Right.
and then you're going into your welfare spaces. The reality is they don't need liquid to air, that might be air to air. So all of a sudden you've got this hybrid of not just air to air cooling a data hall, we've got these variances going on. But what I also know is talking with engineering teams, everyone has their preferred choices.
Okay.
There's not necessarily a standardization. Everyone wants to do their own flavor. But that's where we as a firm, we're flexible in how we construct. We want to work with what suits the overall target, which is let's take care of GPUs and keep them running, and obviously CPUs.
Interesting. Falk, do you want to sort of jump into on that topic? I wanted to know what concerns customers most are you finding in relation to the technology
Yeah.
side of it?
I think in principle, I believe our industry will definitely change to more liquid cooling. So I think in 5 years' time, and we will sit here again maybe, then the air cooling is more the rare thing than the liquid when it comes to AI. And the high density requirements are just going up and up. And at some point, it's like in the automotive car industry. I think the last Porsche air cooled was in the 90s, and since then it's water cooled. It will happen in our industry as well. I worked in a company before with OVH Cloud. Don't want to make too much marketing for them, but they are very smart. They do this since 20 years. So my data center I was running in Frankfurt, 8 megawatt only, but it was entirely water cooled, nothing else.
Interesting.
So it's coming. I definitely think it's coming. And there are risks because absolutely there's not one standard.
No.
I was just in Frankfurt at the data center world. It was like every third booth was a new kind of technology when it comes to water cooling. It will take a time to get to more standards, but it's needed because the new requirements will just go up. I mean, you can go maybe up to 50 kilowatts per rack at some point, still air cooled. But that's really then where it really gets tough.
No, that's great.
And the kilowatts go up and up and up.
You make really valid points. Lewis, sorry.
Just something else on that, in terms of when you talk about the cooling architecture, it's not just about what's happening at that chip or the air blowing in, it's now your coordination within the data center. So again, I remember when I joined this market and false floors were all the rage, and it was because they were going to throw cool air under and then they were going to come up through vents, and then when you look under that false floor, it was filled with cables. So there was no airflow management at all. There was butcher's curtains hanging up and all sorts to try and divide these hot and cold aisles. So where we've come from, say 5-6 years ago to now is a monumental leap. But that coordination doesn't always sit right with people. The idea that you're going to take away false floors and you're going to have a £3,000 rack with Blackwell is not going to sit on a false floor and issue reinforced, so you then put it on your slab. You're now going to have secondary technical loop all sitting above a rack. The idea of water above a rack scares the life out of people. So then you start talking about the talent side of things of, well, what is your talent in welding? What is your product selection in pipe work? All of those things, it's a mental shift.
Yep.
And again, it comes back to what is the overall drive of NeoCloud, is to produce data. So they're getting over that mental shift, whereas maybe some traditional sites, they don't want to go that route because it's not what they're used to.
That's great, thank you. No, super interesting stuff. Andrew, I'll come to you next. So NeoCloud providers are becoming increasingly known for their speed to market times, as we touched upon just briefly. How are developers reducing deployment times from years to months? How are they doing this? And can the pace realistically continue?
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing is that people will always look for a faster time to market. People always want lean infrastructure. They always want to minimize their investment. A lot of these companies have self-built programs, and in the end, they're projecting, they're guesstimating workloads in the same way that we all are. And you have mistakes in those. Some of the time, business comes to us or comes out, finds its way into the market when those mistakes are made, and that puts a lot of pressure on your delivery timeline. It will continue to put a lot of pressure on your delivery timelines across the industry. I think what's really fundamental is that companies are looking for a reliable partner. They're looking for a partner that can deliver what they're describing, that is selling something they actually have. And so I think, what that means for providers like us is just being clear about what you can actually deliver.
So communication is key, basically.
Yeah, but also clarity. Not, you
Yeah.
know, it can be tempting to say, well, you know, we'll have that live for you in a month and a half, in 3 months, in 4 months, in 6 weeks, when the reality is that sometimes things take longer than that.
Yeah.
There are things you can do in that type of time frame. The other part of the reality is that we all need to make a return on capital. And in the end, if you have a large footprint sat there, if you have an investment that's sat there, then there needs to be a way to capitalise to pass on that cost. There is scope for that. There's scope for optimising that, especially across a distributed platform. But I think customers in the market expect to see a ramp. They expect to understand what businesses have, understand what's feasible, what time frames are feasible for different scales in different locations. You know, for me, that, you know, there is a piece about time to market, about making sure you have an efficient delivery model, one that understands what your customers are looking for. It doesn't try to over-deliver, so that you keep things as efficient as possible. You stick to your wheelhouse. But there's also a piece about being, you know, being transparent about your own asset base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And you mentioned capital. Christian, I was going to ask you the dreaded financing questions that everyone avoids when I ask them. But from a financing perspective, has AI infrastructure become more difficult to fund given the grid constraints, the risk, the energy concerns, and the rising power costs?
It depends.
Okay.
It depends on what particular piece of infrastructure you're looking at. In some parts of the market, the neoclouds and so on, it's had a kind of perverse opposite effect where there's a lot of private equity speculatively getting into it quickly, because the potential of an agile GPU type deployment, the returns on that are so much more significant than on cloud storage and so on. So there's a lot of money chasing the growth in this and trying to get in early. And there's a lot of players. There's something like 200 neoclouds now or something like that out there. And a lot of money going in speculatively. GPU as a service effectively is a speculative play a lot of the time. It's not like the traditional play where we are in the market now, where there's no money until you've got that lease signed, and then you know what the compute is, you know what you're going to design, and you've got certainty of income. Right, off we go. Actually, a GPU as a service is effectively going out there to say, right, well, you know, come to us. We want customers. You know, they might want that one anchor pretty early on, but so that's actually a very high risk space for the financiers.
Interesting.
Because a few people are going to get their fingers burned because they're going to put the wrong bet on, and that platform's not going to take off for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then I think from a financing point of view, in that world, you'll start to see in the next few years, as with any market that explodes like that, an awful lot of consolidation.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of mergers, a lot of buyouts. A lot of people like CoreWeave and so on are just going to go, great, you've set up this infrastructure in this location, and we'll have that, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Because they're not getting the return that they're going to be put on the market.
I actually just wanted to get Falk's insight on this, just off the back of your points there. Would you say investors are asking different questions to what they were 2 years ago, for example?
It's a tricky one. So you're absolutely right. Some private equity money is amazing how much money is going to the market, especially for that. But it has increased the risk. If you then, at the end, want to mix your financing and ask the banks about traditionally what they think about AI, they are a little bit scared right now. So they like to be part of the party. So you have some neoclouds, it's interesting, but not too much, please.
Yeah.
Because it could be a risk. I mean, a general risk in this industry, and it, in short term, people might be over expectation, have too much expectation about returns. Long term, it will be there. But think about the effect NVIDIA is getting every 3 months, it feels, a new kind of version of the GPUs. Okay. And so everybody wants to have the latest.
Yes.
So they get produced, and what about the old ones? What about the ones I just bought 6 months ago or a year ago? So it gets a little bit tricky about the effect. So the investment gets more risky. For sure. It will be chances, and I fully agree. There will be some projects going just bust and
Yes.
just disappear. There will be a shake-up in the future. In the long term, it will be there.
Okay, great.
The technology is just too strong.
Very interesting stuff. Okay, so we've covered a lot there. I'd love to bring the audience at this point. So we've got around 8 minutes actually for questions. So if you'd like to ask one, please raise your hand, and someone from the team will bring a microphone to you. So anybody for questions, potentially? No takers? No one's brave enough. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So we've got time for some more. So we've spent a lot of time talking about AI factories and neo cloud providers. But what does that mean for the rest of the market? You know, I know your companies you guys work for, they're much smaller than a neo cloud and an AI in a lot of cases, in terms of Portus as well and nLighten, you know, its edge facilities. So maybe Andrew, you could be best to pick up this question.
Yeah, I think we exist as an infrastructure provider in the market, and you have to be realistic and understand that that is a small piece of the value chain. We exist to provide a scalable platform, a platform that allows, and that's about telling those parties what you can offer them. In the end, I think a lot of these companies have also grown quickly. The expectations, and in some cases, that leads to a slightly more reasonable way of doing business than you might expect with a hyperscaler.
Okay.
So,
Does it make the competition more fierce, would you say, between other smaller providers and developers? In the UK, for example, we're seeing a lot of developers, KO, nLighten, Data4.
I mean, there's certainly competition.
Okay.
In the end, you have to be offering a best-in-class product, a product that's faster, a product that's where your customers want it, but we've also talked about the constraints in the market. Those constraints drive innovation in the end, and some parties are able to bring that. Some parties are able to do business in locations that others aren't able to. Yeah. And certainly within nLighten, we have an ability to look at business models that not every data center company looks at. So I think we're finding that differentiation is a means of avoiding that competition, or maybe not avoiding it, but it's a means of competing. We're also finding that constraints on power actually make our customers' lives at least as difficult as our lives are. Yeah. In terms of competing. Yes, it's a busy space. Yeah. But it's a busy space because there's so much demand.
And I feel like heat reuse is something that's coming up more and more at the moment. You're laughing, Christian, because I think you've heard it many times clearly, but is it something that we're all going to have to be doing now? Is this going to become a necessary thing that every data center developer is going to have to do?
I think there's offering and there's doing, and they're not always the same thing.
Right.
You know, should we have parties in the market? Should we give people the right to occupy green area, to constrain our grids, if they're not going to give anything back, if they don't commit to giving anything back? I think a lot of people would say, maybe they shouldn't be first in the queue. On the other hand, do we have to make people build out infrastructure that isn't of beneficial use to society, or is that just a cost that society doesn't need to bear? So I think there's kind of credence in both sides of that argument, and for me, having a statutory basis that says, well, everyone has to at least come to the party, that sets a nice level playing field.
Interesting, yeah. Okay, so I just want to sort of leave it on a final note. What's one prediction about AI infrastructure that you think the industry currently is getting wrong? What's a prediction that they thought was going to happen maybe a few years ago and it's not followed through, you could say? Have you got any thoughts on that, Lewis?
How quick it's going to happen?
Okay.
I think people have become, you said it before, braggarts, people become obsessed with high expenditure, high megawatt deployments, gigawatt deployments. Yes, the US is doing it. Yes, they're having varying levels of success and growth, but certainly in Europe we're going to lag. And I also think there will be a rethink of a more mature approach to how do we get GPUs deployed. In the last 18 months I've had anything from we want it in 18 months to we want it in 10 months. And then in most cases those things go very quiet, very quick. So I kind of
That's the
wonder,
18 months, sorry, or the 10
yeah,
months?
no, both.
Okay.
But, the people are just throwing out time frames because of maybe something that they feel they want to do rather than what is the mature way of doing things. There are things you can expedite, but the reality is permitting, finding land power, getting the power. They will all slow down processes. So this expectation of, again, go back to the GTC last year where everything kind of triggered to a degree. People expected it now. It's got to be now. No, it's not. I think we look at this as a 5 to 7 year growth plan. And as I said earlier, there will be some that come and go because things just won't be the right business model. But certainly that perception of how quick it's going to happen, I think, is the biggest misnomer in it.
Nice. Blaine, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the AI sector's literally only just begun. If you look at, ChatGPT and Anthropic, and you look at their models at the moment, and obviously they take a bit of time to reason with you right now. If you think like how fast these models are coming out, the more faster they're getting, the more compute we're all going to need. So, for me, what I'm seeing, and, like I say, some of the VCs and the money that is getting thrown into this sector, for me, I just think it's literally just begun.
Only the start, and much more to come. Okay, great. So I'll just check one more time if anybody's got any questions. And then if definitely not, I think we'll wrap up for today. Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline.